Hey, welcome on back to The Reckoning. Into the next half hour we go, and I'm very glad to be joined now on video by State Senator Joe Nicola. If you're not familiar with him, I very much encourage you to look him up. Of course, District 11 out on the western side of our state. He was first elected in 2024, so he's in the middle of his first term. But SenatorJoeNicola.com, that's where I'd really like you to go, because you will find the Senator's Digest, an excellent blog, a lot of stuff that comes out, especially during session, typically weekly. I'd love for you to get familiar with that. It's an excellent look into it. But here to help me kind of give his take on a little bit of the primary results we saw last night, some of the astounding margins, Senator Joe Nicola. How are you doing, sir? Thank you for being with me.
Yeah, thank you. Great.
Very good. Well, I got to dive right in because you've got a good blog post up. The people have spoken. And I apologize if I cut you off there. My headphones glitched for a second, and I wasn't sure if you were finished. But yeah, the huge margins. I honestly, the results of the election statewide don't necessarily surprise me. In fact, the results of a lot of the candidates don't surprise me. What did take me by surprise, flabbergasted me, quite frankly, was the massive margins, nearly 80% on almost everything, and a yes on 1 and 2, a no on 4 and 5. These are huge margins, and it doesn't seem to necessarily line up with candidates. A lot of incumbents who were sent back or sent on to higher office who put these amendments forward, and yet their amendments were resoundingly defeated. What's your take on what we saw last night?
Yeah, so it was quite a shellacking, right? Especially Amendment 4, Amendment 5. I did not expect that. The people spoke for certain. And I mean, I was expecting maybe 60%, but in the 80s is just, it's unbelievable, especially with all the money that was spent in support of Amendment 5 in particular. Amendment 4, I voted for it in the Senate, and I voted for it on the ballot, and it's not perfect. It wasn't my preferred IP reform bill, but it's better than what we have now. But one of the issues with Amendment 4 that I even said this before we voted on it is, number one, who's gonna spend the money in support of it once we get it on the ballot, and then how are you going to message this? Because the messaging is going to be really bad, right? We're taking away the people's authority. That's what they're going to hear, and that's really what ended up happening. Amendment 5, I opposed it before we even voted on it. I stood up on the Senate floor and opposed it, and I'm only one of 3 Senate Republicans that voted against it in the Senate, and I think I'm the only one that's been vocally opposing it ever since. I've had many town halls and talked to people all over, and it was just, in my opinion, it was poorly written, and it was a dangerous bill. I want to eliminate the state income tax. I think most Republicans would love to do that, but I thought this framework, this process was not the right process for Missouri.
Yeah, and I'll say I told my listeners several times I ended up voting yes on Amendment 5. I said that a few weeks ago. That was the way I was going. But quite frankly, I'll tell you and really anyone else, I ended up voting yes in spite of many of the proponents that I heard at public town halls, coming on my radio show. It was not very streamlined and coherent messaging. It was far too easy, in my opinion, to argue against it. And quite frankly, you're right on 4 as well. Oh, yeah, they're taking away your right to vote. Well, no, they're not. But also, it's really scary to say that. And if you don't have a real good one-liner comeback, you're going to be in a hard way. And sure enough, it was to the tune of nearly 80%. So right. I'm curious because there's so many factors to this. First of all, you could argue both Amendment 4 and 5. Overarching, yes, I want to stop the abuse of our Constitution. I would love to eliminate income tax. I even don't mind moving toward consumption taxes instead of income or property taxes. The way in which those are done is very important. These were not the best way, I don't think. The way that you got to put those forward and message for them was not the best way. But also, we saw a huge split, a divide amongst conservatives. And that, I think, really attributes to the numbers. The 80% is not only do you have Missouri, half of us really in this state aren't all that conservative. It's still a bit of a blue dog Democrat state. But you've got those combined with maybe half of the conservative voters of Missouri that said no because they were opposed to it as well. That's how you get to these numbers. How do we not let that happen on something like Amendment 3, which I think is so very vital in November?
That's a great question. I wish I had a good answer for it. I don't really know. I've been very saddened to see what's happening with the grassroots. It's very splintered. The Republican Party splintered. You just take all of these lying ads, about Amendment 5, the TV ads, the flyers that came, the mailers that came. If you have to lie so bad to convince people to vote for what's good for them, something's not right, right? So I don't, to answer your question, I don't know. I don't know what the best answer is. I would love to see the grassroots in particular coalesce into one massive unit, because I think we can really affect a lot of great legislation for the state. I mean, one of the things that happens, quite frankly, is when I ran, people were behind me. They're excited. They helped me win. But I'll tell you, you take one vote in the Senate that they don't like, and then they're blowing you up. And you can't do that and have a cohesive group moving forward. We're never going to agree with everybody all the time. I tell my congregation, I've been married for 42 years. My wife and I don't agree on everything, and we're never going to agree on everything. But we can still, work together and accomplish some great things. But when we're fighting one another, it's just tearing things apart. And when, even I was actively opposed to Amendment 5, but then I'm likened to a socialist, I'm likened to a Marxist and a communist, and being told I'm on the wrong side of history and all of these kinds of names. And that doesn't do anybody any good, especially in our party. We can argue and debate policy and issues all day long. But when it turns personal and you start attacking character, it's gone way too far, and you're doing damage and destruction to the party.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it really is, we live in an era where, especially under the Trump era, it's on one side sad to see. You kind of want to say, I wish we could go back to the Reagan era of not attacking fellow Republicans. But I do want to course correct fellow Republicans. But boy, we live in an era now where the radical communists, quite frankly, really are just coming out of the closet on the Democrat side of the aisle. And it has become, you say, wow, they've driven us to such a diametrically opposed division in this country. Well, really, quite frankly, on the other side of the aisle, there is a massive faction of people who hate me, hate the way of life here, and want to completely upend the country into a totalitarian state. Those folks I treat differently in my opposition. I still, they're created in the image of God. I don't hate people. I do hate the positions. But those folks I even argue with and treat differently than people on my own side. And we've really taken that to heart here, where instead of just, well, that guy's a little more moderate or a little more of maybe an establishment Republican than I am, I need to go course correct him a little bit. It just turns into, well, he's a rhino and we got to throw him out. Well, hold on. It's actually not bad. I like your marriage equation. I mean, unlike a marriage, you can't just pick up and move states if you want. But in this case, hey, I live with these folks. I got to figure out a way to work forward with them. I may not agree, but we've got to figure out a path forward. That's just plain and simple.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree with that. Yeah. I hope this doesn't happen with Amendment 3, but it's been happening. I mean, even since we voted on it last year in the legislature, we have these two factions of grassroots and Republicans, and people want to be an abolitionist. And I would like to too. We had that, right? We had that at one time and we lost it. And now we have the worst abortion law in the country. So what do we do? Keep that instead of at least moving the ball way forward with this next Amendment 3. So let's coalesce and get that done. And here's another thing about the abortion, and very few people are talking about. Over 60% of abortions are done by the pill, and Amendment 3 is not going to affect that.
Right.
We need some legislation for the abortion pill. And these women are taking it at home. And if they have a medical emergency, they're by themselves in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
So
we got to get back to a lot of good layers of pro-life legislation. There's work to be done. Folks, we're going to take a quick break. Senator Joe Nicola, he's sticking around with us. We're going to continue this conversation on the other side. We'll be right back, folks. Hey, we're back on the reckoning. Into the next segment we go. Got State Senator Joe Nicola on the phone with me, District 11 out in the western side of the state. We're picking apart some of the amendments and the dynamics of not just the amendments, the results from yesterday, but what that means for us as a state, really what I'm honing in on, what that means for us as the conservative movement moving forward. We were just talking about how this plays into Amendment 3 on the ballot in November. Let me dive right back into that, because then I would like to ask you just a little bit about some of the dynamics you expect moving forward. We obviously saw some re-elections, some folks from the House moving into the Senate, and we saw a couple of upsets last night. So there were a few different pieces, but on Amendment 3 specifically, let me ask you this. In your doings and town halls and different things on that side of the state, what's one of the primary? I've seen some division amongst conservatives on Amendment 3. Mostly the argument I hear is it doesn't go far enough. That's why I'm not supporting it. So I'm curious, is that the same thing you're hearing, or what are some of the conservative or grassroots, if you may, opposition points to Amendment 3 that you're hearing? And how big of a group is that really, at least in your estimation?
Well, I haven't actually been talking about Amendment 3. I've been talking about Amendment 5 in particular.
Mhm.
But I may start doing that as we head into November. And my district is, it's kind of middle of the road. And it's I think it's going to pass in my district, and I'm just concerned with a lot of the conservative grassroots that are, out there on Facebook and social media and telling everybody else to vote against it. I just don't even understand that thought of what do you want to keep the worst abortion law in the country,
Mhm.
where you can have abortion up to birth and transgender surgery, and just a medical professional can perform an abortion. So I think it's a minority. At least I hope it is. I was hearing the same thing about Amendment 2 this time. Amendment 2 affected Jackson County and elected assessor. I handled that in the Senate, and it passed with over 70% of the vote. So I'm expecting Amendment 3 to be very similar.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm very, I'm going to start working very hard on this because I think it has to be a unified issue amongst Republicans. We know what the left is going to say. We know what the Democrat voters are going to say. We're going to go down the, reproductive rights trail of argument here, but it's really, we must coalesce on the right and understand
Yeah,
how this is clawing our
absolutely.
way back from a terrible position. I just don't see a way around it. Yes, I'm a no exceptions abortion, opponent, I should say. I'm a no exceptions pro-lifer. But even still, I will support legislation that takes a big giant step in the right direction and then keep fighting over the rest of it. I'll take my
Absolutely.
75% if I can get it. But let me ask you how that is going to play into not just on that issue, really on some of the social stuff, but really now, especially with Amendment 4 and 5 meeting such defeat, there is still work to be done in the legislature when it comes to constitutional amendments that we need to see going forward, when it comes to tax reform that I'm sure people still have a desire for. It's just going to have a different vehicle than the one that Amendment 5 would have opened up. What are your thoughts on the legislature moving forward? Because we just, Senator Curtis Trent just got upended, and not just an incumbent, but of course someone running for leadership, vying for that role. He was just upended, but a lot of others open seats. We've got some House Republicans moving over to the Senate. What does the makeup look like to you? And it might be a little early to tell when it comes to starting to tackle these issues, and especially the budget, which of course Auditor Fitzpatrick has been hounding y'all about this year. What's it look like? What are you thinking for 2027 when we get to session?
Well, yeah, that remains to be seen, quite frankly, and who ends up becoming leader, floor leader, and pro tem. Looks like nobody's challenging Jason Bean right now, but we'll see. And I didn't have one constituent asking for income tax, elimination before we actually passed that bill. But everybody's been crying about property taxes. And, we did a lot of work, both sides of the Capitol did a lot of work on property tax with all the different committees they had, all kinds of bills. I'm hoping we can get something firm on property tax. But what I've been saying, and it's been consistent in my town halls with the income tax, is, and the state auditor said it, and also the governor has said this, that we do not have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem. So let's get our spending under control. I mean, we got a super majority of Republicans and we have a spending problem.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't equate, right? So
it doesn't surprise me. Republicans are just as good at spending at the federal and state levels. We've got history on that, but
yeah, so we need to get our spending under control. We've lost our ARPA funds, which is a large chunk of our budget. Let's get our budget under control. Let's see where we're really at, because we are going to have to make some hard decisions in our budget. And let's get the people some firm property tax relief. I think property taxes are key to our liberty. We have to save people's homes. People have to have the right in this country to own property. And that's way more important to me than income taxes. Our income tax is only 4.7%. It's nearly a flat income tax. Everybody over $9,100 a year is 4.7%. We're still growing, but we're growing slowly, but we are still growing. We produced more jobs, more than twice the amount of jobs than Tennessee did last year. The data's out there, but there's other things we can do in this state to attract people so our population can grow, and businesses, we can gain more businesses as well. And that's cost of living, that's property, that's schools, that's education. We have a lot of work to do. We're at the bottom of the list for elder care in Missouri. We've got some really major issues here. And it's sad to me that we were just working on the income tax when we went into session this year in the Senate with the Senate Republicans. Our number one priority was property tax reform, and we came away with nothing. No legislation whatsoever, but we all of a sudden come away with Amendment 5, which in my opinion was horrible, and the people believed that it was horrible too. So I don't know. I hope everybody is really taking what happened last night, everybody in the Senate, everybody coming into the House, what happened, what the people are asking for, what the people are wanting, what they're not going to put up with. And let's come together and get the people some real relief.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. First of all, let me say, property taxes are just as, if not more, egregious in my mind than income tax.
Mm-hmm.
That, do I own this property or not, and stop taxing my productivity? These are both terrible ways to go about it. But let me ask you this: what are some of the primary vehicles you're hoping to see resurge in the state legislature for property tax? Because a lot of what people hear when they ask about that, oh well, you got to talk to your county about that or your municipality, really. But what are some of the things you're hoping to see get done? I just got a couple minutes left.
Well, the siloing is really good. That came out. I love my property tax bill, which puts a cap on it. It can't go over 5% every 2 years. Yeah, there's some other provisions in there, just to make it to where the local government can still receive everything they've already got. They can get a CPI, an inflation increase, but people know what their property tax are going to be. Here in Jackson County, we were getting 100%, 300%, some cases 1,000% increase in just one assessment cycle. I mean, that's just criminal. We should be able to cap these. So I'm hoping we can get that done. But it just hasn't seemed like there's much appetite for it.
Yeah, and that's I think that's what's really interesting as I look across the difference between the amendment votes and the candidate votes last night. It really is just interesting to me that a lot of the primary Republican voters said, yeah, you can go back or you can go on to the Senate from the House, but I don't want that thing that you put in front of me on the ballot. I want you to do it a different way. I really hope that sinks in to the legislators, that this isn't just some sort of referendum against the whole thing. We're voting out you and your stuff. This was, no, you go back and try that again. That's what I hope they take from it and take it to heart, because they're given another chance here. A lot of these folks that were reelected last night or moved on to the Senate from the House or vice versa. I don't think I saw that, but they're really given a chance to go and do it better. And to your point, that was a priority. And there are a lot of good things out there that just didn't meet the flashy object, which became income tax elimination.
Yeah. And we already have an income tax reduction law in statute. Let's work with that. And I don't mind that it takes some time, that it's slow. Let's be responsible about it. This is a major change, right? Eliminating our state income tax, and we can do it with growth, but we've got to do some other things to have that growth in our state. Yeah. Without just swapping taxes and raising taxes, but we've got to cut spending, and we got to get our budget under control. Well, I'm looking for some slash and burn. I keep hearing little surgical cuts, and as a real fiscal conservative, I say I think you guys are going to need a little bit more than a scalpel. You might need a kitchen knife at the bare minimum for that one. But Senator Joe Nicola, folks, I really do encourage you. SenatorJoeNicola.com. Go sign up for the Senator's Digest. Whether you're in his district or not, it's great information. And sir, I'm going to be coming back around to you because I'm going to start beating the drum, not just Amendment 3, but we've got this Show Me Prosperity Fund. We've got the Constitutional Sheriff. There's big amendments coming in November. There is. And I'm going to want to get your opinions on those. So we'll do that a different time. Great. Thank you so much for your time and for your advocacy. We appreciate you. Appreciate you too. Thanks a lot. All right, folks, we'll be right back. Hour number 2 is ahead. More shenanigans on the way.